Thank you, thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
I hooked up with a really hot guy recently. He's the kind of hot where he dates models, you know? And then after we hooked up, he goes, I just want to be careful how we go about this because you're not like the other women I date. You're like a real person. Yeah. It's like men don't know where to end a sentence. Every guy I've dated will be like, you're the most beautiful woman in the world to me. It's like, who cares about your opinion, dude? I did like that line, because it's such a fuckboy line, right? Like, you're so real, I'm just not ready for something real is fuckboy 101. Because every fuckboy acts like they're really deep and vulnerable, but some sort of gypsy curse has made them have meaningless sex for the rest of their lives. They all act like when they were 11, a big Scottish man with a beard came up to them and was like, you're a fuckboy, Harry.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Management Wednesday, August the 21st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and management of the absurd. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
All my friends, never low rider.
Thank you. And now, Stuart Varney.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Company picks it up. Stu, live from the DNC. Take it away.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. It was Barack Obama's night, with a backup from Michelle. The former president bashed Trump and defended Biden as his friend, and the president who defended democracy in a time of great danger. The crowd loved them both. Meanwhile, on the floor, the roll call proceeded, and Governor Newsom pledged California's delegates to Harris. That put her over the top. But Harris was not there. She was 90 miles away in Wisconsin. Fox sources are told that the separation was deliberate. Harris didn't want to be seen next to Obama, who Biden blames for pushing him out. No policy last night, just full-throated support for the Democrats' new candidate. Tonight, Tim Walz takes center stage, and the theme at the convention, a fight for our freedoms. The pro-Hamas protesters demonstrated that freedom last night. They burned the American flag. To the markets, and first, let's deal with Target. They released their earnings report early this morning, and although they gave a cautious outlook for sales, the stock is taking off. That has helped the whole market. Target is up 16%. That's enormous. Now, look at the whole market. A cautious outlook on rates, on sales, suggests interest rate cuts are more likely than ever. Dow up about 70, S&P 10, Nasdaq up 32 points. The rally continues. Interest rates, the yield on the 10-year Treasury down to 3.80%. The 2-year yield down below 4%. You're now looking at 3.98. Gold well above $2,550 an ounce, $25.50 to be precise. Bitcoin right around $59,000. Not much change from yesterday. On the show today, Bernie Sanders, who gave an impassioned plea for socialism. He bashed big oil, big ag, and big pharma. Bernie wants to influence Kamala Harris just as he influenced Joe Biden. All government, all the time. It is Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. Varney and Company is about to begin.
So that was Stuart Varney, and back in a minute. Thank you. So I'm listening to and watching a program. It's called Q&A. Brian Lamb. He's interviewing the author of a book, and she also was involved in a documentary. And it's Bethany McLean, and she's wrote a book called All the Devils Are Here. And also she wrote one about Enron. I think All the Devils Are Here is about the 2008 crisis. But this, anyways, is about Enron. And so there's a part of this, something she says that everybody needs to hear.
Really violating the spirit of the law. So there are a lot of people at Enron that you, in an ethical framework, can blame for the company's collapse. But whether they're criminally guilty is a much more difficult call. And to my mind, not as interesting a one, because in the end, this really is a story about human nature. And I find that the more interesting part of the story than sort of the more narrow legalistic definitions of criminal guilt.
Now, the documentary and your book start with a story about a man named Cliff Baxter. Mm-hmm. Why?
We began the book with the story of Cliff Baxter. He's an Enron executive who committed suicide in the wake of the company's bankruptcy. He was a very senior Enron executive and was also one of Jeff Skilling's close friends. They used to take cigarette breaks together. We began the book with his suicide because we wanted to signal to readers that this was a story about people, and this was a story about humans. And I think at the time when we were writing our book, there was a presumption that Enron was a story about numbers, about complicated financial transactions that you don't want to understand even if you could. And I think there was another presumption, which is that these were just bad people doing bad things down in Houston, Texas, and none of us could ever do anything like that. And so I think the story we wanted to tell was a story about people and a story of people with very human, fatal flaws, so that it becomes more of a story more of a tragic tale rather than this story of this limited story of bad people.
Okay, so right there. See, that's a big problem, is this is part of the left-wing culture, is this whole idea of getting rid of right and wrong, good and bad. And there's no good people, there's no bad people, and you see it every day when you're watching television, Law and Order and other programs in which there's no good guys, and there's not really any bad guys. Everybody's kind of bad in these series. But anyways, that's what she's basically saying here. They're almost, as far as she's concerned, tragic figures. It's almost like a Greek story, a story from old Athens, from the Athenians, and that these people were, in a way, victims themselves, and that's crap. The story she should have written is that it was bad people doing bad things, because that's what it was. It's as simple as that. Fraud is bad. And that's it's as simple as that. You might want to do a study in terms of finding out which one of the people at Enron was most culpable. It sounds like the guy that was running the whole thing, Skilling, was psychopathic or sociopathic, and that's part of the reason why it happened. So, but the left likes to make this a deterministic argument that somehow these people were forced to do this by circumstances beyond their control, the business climate, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I just wanted you to hear how she is dismissing their culpability. And a lot of these people in Enron, some of them were prosecuted, criminally prosecuted. There's at least one of them that's in prison right now. Good people don't go to prison. People that are just misunderstood don't go to prison. Bad people go to prison. So when you hear this, when you hear people that are making these, I don't even know how to describe it. I was going to say moral equivalency, but it's not even really that. A denial, I think, of morals, a moral denial that there is no right and wrong, that people don't do things that are right and wrong when obviously they do. You got to reject that. You need to reject it psychologically. You need to reject it socially, and that's what you have to do as a true conservative. Don't just go along with this. It's tempting because you think, well, if maybe our society's that way, maybe that means I can do the same thing that the Enron people did. I can rip people off. I can rip off the IRS. I can rip off my neighbors, etc. And then the next thing you know, you're in trouble. And next thing you know, you're a bad person and suffering because of it. So, again, when you hear people morally whitewashing, I guess that's the best way to put it, bad behavior, don't accept it. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the military short.
The SR-72 Dark Star will finally have its debut flight this year. Let me explain. This is the SR-72, known as the Son of the Blackbird. First announced by Lockheed Martin in 2013, this aircraft is much better than the iconic SR-71. With the new advanced technology, the SR-72 will be capable of reaching speeds of up to Mach 6, or 4,000 miles per hour, and reach heights of up to 80,000 feet, which is triple the height of Mount Everest. This amount of speed and power means the Dark Star can reach anywhere in the world within an hour, taking recon missions to a whole new level. But it's powered by an all-new hybrid jet and rocket engine. This insane technology uses a system called a turbine-based combined cycle, meaning the jet can switch between a turbine engine for slower speeds and a scramjet engine to reach supersonic speeds. In 2018, Lockheed Martin executives hinted at a potential SR-72 test flight by 2025. PED. The SR-72...
And that was the military short. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of motivation.
You can write everything down if you want to. Be brave enough to write every one of your goals down. But I'm going to tell you something. Life's going to hit you in your mouth, and you got to do me a huge favor. Your why has to be greater than that knocked out Are you willing to get your teeth kicked out for your dream? That's why many are called, but few are chosen. Because everybody won't get the beat down. Everybody's not willing to face rejection. Everybody will not talk to 4 people and visualize 5,000. Everybody won't take the controversy. Everybody won't take the heat. Everybody won't hold themselves to a higher standard.
As soon as you write your dream down, somebody about to bust you in your mouth. Whatever it is that thing you say you want to do, they coming at you. The reason why you do what you do is more critical than what you do. Because if your reasoning is weak, you're not going to get it done. Why? Because life is going to beat you upside your head. Life will strip you to the core. Once your balls start tripping, you about to start crying. Once life hits you with a punch or two, you ready to quit. Phenomenally skilled is cute, but it is a phenomenal will that says every time I get knocked down, I will get back up and I will succeed. I will not surrender. But if you're weak, you will be broke. And I'm not here because I'm the best. I'm here because they tried to break me and they couldn't.
Think about your community. Think about your kids. Think about the obstacles and the problems, the so-called problems in your community. Think about them. Osborne said, in life, you will always be faced with a series of God-ordained opportunities brilliantly disguised as problems and challenges. We can't judge according to appearances. We must look at the poverty and the despair and the pain and the stress. And in the midst of that, we see prosperity. We see health. We see peace. We see possibility.
I'm telling you to dream your dream because I want you to feel it. I want you to taste it. I want you, just like when the weather is changing, you can feel it. I want you to be able to feel when you're getting closer to it and closer to it. If you are still alive, there's still room for growth. There's still room for improvement. You can still get bigger. You can still get better. You can still be bolder. There's still room to grow and be better.
Get out of your head and into your greatness. You can't stroll to your goals. You keep being casual, you will end up a casualty. Death is not the greatest tragedy of our time. The greatest tragedy is what dies inside of us while we're still alive. Not trusting your gift is sinful because by God, it was put in you. I don't know what you've been through, but trust your heart. It will defend you.
You need to use your tongue to validate your gift and look yourself in the mirror and encourage yourself as to I'm still gifted. I've been through some pain, but I'm still gifted. I've buried some loved ones, but I'm still gifted. I've had some setbacks, but I'm still gifted. Despite the circumstance, you can win. Despite the giants, you can win. Despite the adversity, you can win. Despite the obstacles, you can win. Despite the situation, you can win. Despite how much money you got in your bank, you can win. You can pull it off.
Why do you do what you do? Why is that important, Les? Because when the storms of life come, and they're going to come, when life pounces on you, and that's going to happen, when it catches you on the blind side and drop you to your knees, and that's going to happen, when people don't come through for you and don't keep their words and don't support you or actively work against you, and that's going to happen, when you want to give up, and that's going to happen, your reasons will be your bridge over troubled waters. You got to know why you're out here, because you're going to get your butt kicked. But you gotta know why you're there, because your reasons, when life drops you to your knees, your reasons will help you get back up.
What are the reasons? Write down why you're here. Write down 5 compelling reasons of why you're gonna keep your commitment to change your life. Keep your commitment never to go back to the life that you once lived. Keep your commitment to creating wealth for yourself, to taking care of your children, to be more responsible. Keep your commitment to live a life of contribution, to keep your commitment to be a conqueror, and to act like it, and to have authority and dominion of everything in your life. What are those reasons if life knocked you down, try and land on your back? Because if you can look up, you can get up. Your reasons will help you to get back up again.
What's that thing that's going to pump you up and get you over that hill? What's going to pump you up and get you over that mountain? What's going to pump you up and get you past that disease? What's going to pump you up and get you past bankruptcy? What's going to pump you up and get you past that crazy credit score you got? What's going to pump you up and get you to the other doggone side?
I'm talking about hope. You got to be able to see it when it cannot be seen. You got to see it in your mind's eye. You have to see it happening. You have to see yourself writing the book before the book is finished. You got to see it. You have to see yourself graduating even though the teachers are telling you that it's not going to happen, even though you got the letter saying you're getting kicked out of school, that you're on academic probation, that you're dismissed, you have to believe in the unseen, because if you can't believe in it, you will never manifest it. But when you believe in it, you demand the universe to assist you in what you're doing, and if you can see it before everybody else can see it, then it's going to eventually come to you.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Think before you act. For to be wise is only one thing, to fix our attention on our intelligence, which guides all things everywhere. Heraclitus, quoted in Diogenes Laertius, Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, 9.1. Why did I do that? You've probably asked yourself. We all have. How could I have been so stupid? What was I thinking? You weren't. That's the problem. Within that head of yours is all the reason and intelligence you need. It's making sure that it's deferred to and utilized that's the tough part. It's making sure that your mind is in charge, not your emotions, not your immediate physical sensations, not your surging hormones. Fix your attention on your intelligence. Let it do its thing.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Bishop Robert Barron.
Love God first, and then love everything and everybody else for the sake of God. That's the right ordering of our loves. What's the tendency of your will? Well, it has to be to God first and above all, and then everything else in light of that basic love. How's the Bible put it, by the way? Both Old Testament and New. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. And then Jesus adds, and the second commandment is like it, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's a basic principle. It might be the master principle of the whole Bible.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, so long as men believe that the initiation of physical force by some men against others is a proper part of an organized society, hatred, violence, brutality, destruction, slaughter, and the savage gang warfare of group against group are all they can or will achieve. Unquote. And that's Ayn Rand for the New Intellectual from the book For the New Intellectual. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the 33 Strategies of War.
From The Templars and the Assassins by James Wasserman. Throughout his revolutionary and missionary travels, Hassan, leader of the Nizari Ismailis, was searching for an impregnable fortress from which to conduct his resistance to the Seljuk Empire. In about 1088, he finally chose the castle of Alamut, built on a narrow ridge on a high rock in the heart of the Elburz Mountains, in a region known as the Rudbar. The castle dominated an enclosed, cultivated valley 30 miles long and 3 miles across at its widest, approximately 6,000 feet above sea level. Several villages dotted the valley, and their inhabitants were particularly receptive to the ascetic piety of Hassan. The castle was accessible only with the greatest difficulty through a narrow gorge of the Alamut River. Hassan employed a careful strategy to take over the castle, which had been granted to its current Shiite owner named Mahdi by the Seljuk Sultan Malik Shah. First, Hassan sent his trusted Dai, Hussein Kaini, and 2 others to win converts in the neighboring villages. Next, many of the residents and soldiers of Alamut were secretly converted to Ismailism. Finally, in September 1090, Hassan himself was secretly smuggled into the castle. When Mahdi realized that Hassan had in fact quietly taken over his fortress, he left peacefully. From Human, All Too Human.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you're a Democrat, you should vote for somebody else other than Joe Biden because he simply hasn't done anything for you. I'm not talking about how he's not conservative enough or he hasn't balanced the budget or things like that because I know you guys don't particularly care about all that. I'm talking about the things you care about. Number one thing he was going to do that you care about is stack the court. He was going to expand it by 4 seats. By going ahead and getting D.C. to be a state, Puerto Rico to be a state, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever happened to that? He started a committee or commission to study the problem, and that's where all good ideas go to die. And so that's nothing. So now what about single payer? Where are we on single payer? Because isn't it Obamacare supposed to be a step in the direction of single payer? So how come that hasn't happened? He hasn't done anything. What about war? Democrats are supposed to be the party of peace. But he has allowed 2 wars to break out and continue under his administration. So, and then again, what about things like inflation? Going to the grocery store and having to pay more. And nobody can deny that there's inflation because we all go to the grocery store and we all know that the prices have gone up. And that's no good for anybody. So just for those 3 things, why bother to vote for Joe Biden? He hasn't done for you what he promised to do. So you got to vote for somebody else. If you can't bring yourself to vote Republican, then vote Robert Kennedy. Back in a minute. Thank you. So about my second part of this Enron clip that I just played from this author, The Smartest Guys in the Room, and that's the Enron book. And so the interesting thing is that she's achieved a certain level of transparency, because what's interesting is that Enron is all about greed, really. It's all about working the system, and as long as they filed the right reports at the right time with the right results, showing the right results, the company was making money. It was almost like a Ponzi scheme. But they really were producing nothing. But they did the report so complicated, nobody could figure out that they were really producing nothing. Nobody could figure out how they were making their money. And then in the end, it all comes crumbling down. Now, but there were people that she's saying came away with money. This Chinese guy that named Pei, that got over $200 million, walked away with over $200 million. But anyways, she wrote a book. And, of course, the book is for sale. She didn't do it out of the goodness of her heart. It wasn't, she didn't donate, she didn't write this book and then just give it away for free. She sells the book, and so she's making money off of this debacle as well, fame and fortune, because also then she goes out on and is interviewed by Brian Lamb, and then I'm sure she goes to other places and gets paid to do speaking engagements and whatnot. So again, she's trying to be transparent, act as though she is a dispassionate observer, but in a manner of speaking, she's as much a part of the problem as anybody at Enron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, some Maria Bartiromo, and she's talking to Stu Varney.
Warning that I know you're interested in. We understand Kamala Harris is backing Joe Biden's tax increases, and that includes a capital gains tax of 28%, and it includes a tax on unrealized gains of 25%, and get this, a capital gains tax of 44.6%. So you got a 28% corporate tax, a 44.6% top capital gains tax, Stu, and a 25% tax on unrealized gains. And you say?
I say she's been listening to Bernie Sanders, who last night delivered a full-throated roar for socialism. All of the above that you just mentioned, which is now Kamala Harris's policy, that's exactly what Bernie Sanders wants. You've got to drift here to full-scale socialism. A capital gains tax, 44%? Are you kidding me? What do you think that's going to do to investment? What do you think it's going to do to raising taxes on the wealthy? What does that do for the markets? What does it do for the economy? A corporate tax rate moving up to 28%. The economy is clearly slowing down. Do you really want to impose those kind of tax increases at a moment when the economy is slowing down? You'll slow it down some more, won't you? It's a leftward drift, and I hope the country does not accept it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see, Stu. I knew you would have a feeling about this because this has real impact, okay? This has a serious impact in terms of businesses putting money to work. And investors as well. And it doesn't just apply to the stock market. It's even for your house, the point I just made with Howard Lutnick. Stu, we want to check in with you again tomorrow. We'll see you in about 10 minutes on Barney and Company, live from the DNC. Thanks, Stu.
So there you go. And the Republicans are getting ready to make the same mistake that they always make. They're so stupid. They make the same damn mistakes over and over and over and over again. The Democrats have given the Republicans their marching orders a long time ago, decades ago, where they said, okay, this is the way it's going to go. We're going to take the positive side. We're going to be the ones that are going to be coming up with bold new initiatives, and your job is simply to say no to everything that we do. And so that's what they're getting ready to do. Yeah, the problem is that when you give the American people a choice of something or nothing, they're going to take something every time, right? So that's the way it sets up for Republicans to lose. So again, because that's what Varney and Maria are saying. No, they're just basically saying no to all of her proposals. Now remember, there's three ways to say no. You say no, then negotiate, say yes with conditions. Saying no is great when you're in charge. Okay, if you're in charge and somebody comes up and asks you, can we do this, that, or the other thing, then you get to say no. And you don't need to give any explanations or anything else. But when you need other people's cooperation or buy-in, you got to sell the answer. You got to go with one of the other two. Either no and then negotiate. No, I'm not going to go for that, but I'll tell you what I will do. Or say yes with conditions. Sure, that's a great idea, but only under the following conditions. So abortion, for instance, would be a no, but I'll tell you what I will do. I'll support increases on or tougher penalties for men that don't pay child support. But with her proposals, you can say capital gains tax, I got no problem with that, but everybody has to pay. No exemptions. See, that's the key with the Democrats. The Democrats like to talk a good game about raising the taxes on the rich, but they don't. They only raise the taxes on the Republican rich. The Democrat rich get to skate. So that's a vulnerability right there, and I would exploit it as a Republican, stepping in and saying, I'll support every one of your proposals, your tax increase proposals, as long as it's a clean bill. No exemptions for anybody. No exemptions for people in Congress. No exemptions for people in the media. No exemptions for donors. No exemptions at all. Everybody pays their fair share. And then you're putting the Democrats on the spot to see whether or not they really support these tax increases. So again, Now you've set yourself up, by the way, to whereas they've got something, now you've got something. So now we have dueling bills. Their bill is about raising everybody's taxes, but your bill is about raising everybody's taxes without exemptions, and let Americans choose. Now we're really setting up an interesting dynamic here, and a dynamic where Republicans can win. But if we listen to Maria and Stu, it's a losing. It's factually, is it correct what they were saying? It's going to hurt the economy? Absolutely. But nobody cares about the facts. Okay, this is the 7th grade. I see England, I see France, I see someone's underpants. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Speechless from Michael Knowles, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, Chapter 12, The War on Christmas.
Chapter 12, The War on Christmas. The War on Christmas dates back to America's earliest days, though ironically the sides on which the belligerents once appeared have flipped. On Christmas Day, 1621, Governor William Bradford marked the birth of our Lord with puritanical austerity. He forbade celebrations, demanded that his constituents tend their crops as on a regular workday, and confiscated toys and games from the residents who refused to work on Christmas Day. Bradford's policy recalls H.L. Mencken's famous description of Puritanism as the haunting fear that someone, somewhere, may be happy. The liturgically allergic pilgrims of Plymouth Colony considered Christmas celebrations popish and pagan, and they observed the day by putting their Protestant work ethic to use in the fields, though Bradford did permit an exception for the Plymouth residents who desired to spend the day in prayer. On the day called Christmas Day, the governor called them out to work, as was used, but the most of this new company excused themselves and said it went against their consciences to work on the day, Bradford explains in his third-person history on Plymouth Plantation. So the governor told them that if they made it a matter of conscience, he would spare them until they were better informed. But when the governor and his diligent co-congregationalists returned from work for lunch and found the conscientious objectors in the street at play openly, he went to them and took away their implements and told them that it was against his conscience that they should play and others work. Bradford had no problem giving Plymouth's more religiously relaxed residents a day off for Christmas, but they had better not have any fun. The Puritans in America outlawed Christmas celebrations for a full 4 decades, until 1681, and tradition continued to discourage observance of the holiday even after the repeal of laws that officially prohibited festivities. The Reverend Cotton Mather followed in his forefathers' footsteps when he complained in 1712 that the feast of Christ's nativity is spent in reveling, dicing, carding, masking, and in all licentious liberty, for the most part, as though it were some heathen feast of Ceres or Bacchus. But like his forebears, Mather was willing to permit reverent observance of the holiday. New Englanders' opposition to Christmas festivities continued to relax throughout the 18th century until Massachusetts recognized Christmas Day as a public holiday in 1856. President Ulysses S. Grant abolished any remaining stigma around the day 14 years later, in 1870, when he signed legislation making Christmas a federal holiday, alongside New Year's Day, the 4th of July, and Thanksgiving. In the opening engagement of the American War on Christmas, Santa had defeated Scrooge. While today's progressives wage war on Christmas in the name of secularism, the Puritans attacked Christmas for the opposite reason. Bradford, Mather, and all the other Puritans objected to Christmas festivities because they considered them insufficiently pious. With the possible exception of John Knox, the founder of Presbyterianism, who condemned all church festivals, no leading Protestant advocated the total abolition of Christmas. As the English pamphleteer Philip Stubbs complained in 1583, the true celebration of the Feast of Christmas is to meditate, and as it were, to ruminate, upon the incarnation of the birth of Jesus Christ, not only that time, but all the times and days of our life, and to show ourselves thankful to His Majesty for the same. But the proper way to celebrate Christmas, in theory, never seemed to translate into practice. Who is ignorant? Asked Stubbs. that more mischief is that time committed than in all the year besides. What masking and mumming, whereby robbery, whoredom, murder, and what not is committed. What dicing and carding, what eating and drinking, what banqueting and feasting is then used more than in all the year besides. According to Stubbs, such impious observances dishonored God and impoverished all of Christendom. Half a century later, the Puritan polemicist William Prynne lamented that, for the most part, his fellow Englishmen spent the Christmas season, with other solemn festivals, in amorous, mixed, voluptuous, unchristian, that I say not pagan, dancing to God's and Christ's dishonor. These Puritans attacked Christmas in order to defend Christ against the perceived corruptions of papists and pagans, between whom the Reformers did not differentiate. In the centuries following the Protestant Revolution, the celebration of the Nativity on December 25th became the subject of anti-Catholic polemics, which charged that the Church had selected the date because it coincided with various pagan feasts, including celebrations of Saturn, the unconquered sun, and Mithras. History, however, does not back up the polemicists' claims. The chronography of 354 offers the earliest mention of any pagan celebration on December 25th, but the calendar also mentions Christmas on that day. Thus, no evidence exists to suggest that the pagan festivals predated Christian celebration of the Nativity. Saturnalia, established centuries before the Incarnation, does not quite coincide with Christmas. The Romans originally celebrated Saturn on December 17th, and even the feast's expansion to an entire week took the festivities only up through December 23rd. Moreover, no early Christian source mentions any connection between Christmas and the pagan feasts. In fact, the dating of Christ's birth appears to derive not from the date of any pagan feast, but rather from the date of his death. Around the turn of the 3rd century, Tertullian dated the crucifixion to March 25th. Other early Christian writers, notably St. Hippolytus of Rome, stated that the world itself had been created on March 25th, a perfect link between creator and creation. Given the ancient belief that a divine life comprised an exact number of years, Christ's conception would have occurred on the same date precisely 9 months before Christmas. The anonymous 4th century Christian work on solstices and equinoxes defends this view, as does St. Augustine, who wrote in his treatise on the Trinity, "For he is believed to have been conceived on the 25th of March, upon which day also he suffered. So the womb of a virgin in which he was conceived, where no one of mortals was begotten, corresponds to the new grave in which he was buried." This theory regarding the dating of Christmas also helps to explain the discrepancy between the West and the East, where Christians celebrate the Nativity on January 6th. The 4th century Greek bishop Epiphanius of Salamis dated Christ's conception at April 6th, precisely 9 months before Eastern Christmas celebrations. The claim that pagan feasts account for the date of Christmas does not hold up to historical scrutiny. As Pope Benedict XVI explained at the turn of the 21st century, these old theories regarding Roman gods can no longer be sustained. The decisive factor was the connection of creation and cross, of creation and Christ's conception. Still, given the debauchery that often accompanied Christmas, one may forgive the Puritans' mistaken belief in the holiday's pagan origins. As Puritanism declined and transformed throughout the Anglosphere, Christmas came back into fashion during the 18th and 19th centuries. But by the turn of the 20th century, a new critique of Christmas took shape. During the first stage of the War on Christmas, Puritans took issue with the debauchery that they saw accompanying the celebrations. The second phase of anti-Christmas sentiment involved objections to the commercialization of the holiday. Greedy capitalists were selling toys to rapacious children and their indulgent parents, all of whom seemed to care more for sentimental depictions of Santa Claus than for the real Redeemer, whose nativity provided the neglected reason for the season. C.S. Lewis laid out the battle lines of this second stage in his 1954 essay, Xmas and Christmas, a lost chapter from Herodotus. Lewis affects the voice of an ancient Greek historian, invoking the real figures of Herodotus and Hecataeus to describe the imaginary northern island of Niaturb, or Britain spelled backwards. In midwinter, the Niaturbians celebrate a strange festival called Xmas, for which they spend 50 days preparing in the Xmas rush by sending cards that recipients immediately throw out, buying gifts beyond their means, and so glutting themselves on food and drink that they are exhausted by Xmas Day and barely move the day after. But on the same day, a small sect of Nyaturbians celebrate a separate feast called Christmas, which involves doing the opposite of the Xmas enthusiasts. Observers of Christmas eschew the madness of the marketplace, rise early on Christmas Day, and travel to temples to observe a sacred feast involving a fair woman with a newborn child, the details of which mystery the author declines to repeat. Given the diametric difference between the two feasts, Lewis's historian suggests changing the date of Christmas, to which a priest responds, "It is not lawful, O stranger, for us to change the date of Christmas. But would that Zeus would put it into the minds of the Nyaturbians to keep Xmas at some other time, or not to keep it at all. The priest rejoices that men should make merry at Christmas, but unfortunately, in Xmas there is no merriment left." Lewis's perplexed historian asks why Nyaturbians would endure the miserable market rituals of Xmas, to which the priest bluntly replies, "It is, O stranger, a racket." By the middle of the 20th century, many religious conservatives considered the Christmas industry a racket, and that critique persists to this day. Although during the latter decades of that century and the early years of the new millennium, economics-obsessed conservatives throughout the United States and Britain became reflexive defenders of big business, free trade at all costs, and capitalism, a term popularized by Karl Marx, a deeper strain in the conservative tradition has always taken a more skeptical view of industrialization and the invisible hand of the free market, a quasi-religious concept in itself that often fails to live up to the promises of its priests and acolytes. The 20th century critique and the earlier complaints of the Puritans, though they differed in focus, shared one essential quality: the impulse to defend Christmas against corruption. Governor Bradford opposed Christmas celebrations because he considered such festivities an affront to Christ himself. C.S. Lewis deplored the practice of sending Christmas cards, buying expensive presents, and gorging oneself at holiday dinners, because he believed those rituals distracted from the spiritual significance of the Nativity. At every stage of the war on Christmas before the late 20th century, all combatants shared the same basic standard. Puritan and merrymaker alike espoused Christianity. Their disagreement concerned how properly to observe the birth of Christ. The most recent and familiar phase of the war on Christmas, which arose during the 1980s and 90s and continues to this day, falls along fundamentally different battle lines. On one side, both the religious and commercial observers of Christmas, as well as the great majority of people who fall somewhere between the two poles, defend public recognition of the holiday. On the other side, ideologues seek to drive Christmas out of the public square, and they justify this cultural upheaval according to the politically correct values of secularism, inclusion, and diversity. The aggressors in this new attack on Christmas have pursued two contradictory strategies. First, they deny that any such war exists. The left-wing Americans United for Separation of Church and State regularly decries the religious right's phony war on Christmas, which the organization calls bogus. Then, no sooner does one detail decades of anti-Christmas activism than the politically correct campaigners change their tune from denial to dismissal. Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post columnist Colbert King exemplified this shifting of the goalposts in a 2017 piece titled, "I Don't Care About Merry Christmas." Setting aside the unlikelihood that King would dedicate his national newspaper column to a topic about which he did not care, one at least appreciates the liberal author's admission that the war on Christmas exists, even if he dismissed the conflict as cynically manufactured. King's choice of words revealed his own cynical strategy. He did not deny the campaign to replace Christmas with generic terms such as holidays, nor did he deny that liberals have led the charge to change the words, a campaign he credited to respect for the sensibilities of others. Rather, King insisted that the semantic switch didn't matter. But 4 decades of consistent anti-Christmas activism suggests the distinction matters quite a lot to politically correct radicals. The first skirmish in this latest phase of the War on Christmas took place during the early 1980s in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which since 1943 had erected an annual Christmas display in the city's shopping district. The display included a Christmas tree, a Santa Claus house, a small village comprising 4 houses, and a church, a group of carolers, a spray of reindeer, a clown, a dancing elephant, a robot, a teddy bear, a banner that read Season's Greeting, and a creche. A dozen or so of these elements acknowledged one of the most important holidays in Christendom, and only one of them included Christ. But that was one too many for Pawtucket resident Daniel Donnelly, who demanded the city remove the baby Jesus. When the city refused, he sued Pawtucket with the help of the equally radical and ironically named American Civil Liberties Union. The District Court of Rhode Island ruled that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment prohibited the city from displaying the creche, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the District Court's ruling. The city persisted in defending the nativity scene, and the case made its way to the Supreme Court on October 4th, 1983. Another Christmas passed with the plaster baby's fate in limbo, until the following March 5th, when the court ruled in a 5-4 decision to overturn the lower court's rulings and preserve Pawtucket's right to portray the birth of Christ at Christmas. The court majority gave conservatives an immediate victory in this new front of the war on Christmas, but the narrow ruling set the stage for more litigation in the years to come. Just one vote had prevented the federal government from banishing Christ from Christmas, and the court only ruled in Jesus' favor because it found legitimate secular purposes in Pawtucket's display of the creche, as well as insufficient evidence to establish that the inclusion of the creche is a purposeful or surreptitious effort to express some kind of subtle governmental advocacy of a particular religious message. The Son of God could remain, but only on the grounds that he was not a religious figure. Conservatives won the case, but the arguments by which they won undermined their broader cultural objectives. Pawtucket argued, and the court agreed, that the creche was secular and therefore did not violate the Establishment Clause. In fact, Pawtucket had every right to display the creche even if the city admitted its intrinsically religious character. Even the establishment of a state church in Rhode Island might not violate the Establishment Clause, which historically prohibited only the federal government from making any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Although secularists invoke the separation of church and state, a slogan they paraphrase from an 1802 letter by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut, neither the phrase nor the sentiment it now represents appears anywhere in the Constitution. We can know with certainty that the Establishment Clause did not prohibit states from establishing churches because at the time of the ratification of the First Amendment, several states maintained their established churches. New Hampshire did not disestablish its church until 1817. Connecticut kept its congregational establishment until the following year, and Massachusetts funded its state church until 1833, 4.5 decades after it ratified the U.S. Constitution. The city of Pawtucket and the Supreme Court majority fell into a trap that has permitted political correctness to advance for decades and cost conservatives the culture. Pawtucket, the court, and conservatives broadly have accepted the radicals' premise that secular liberalism is somehow a neutral battleground on which to play politics. In reality, that premise gives away the game and the country to the politically correct left. There will never be a firm wall of separation between church and state, pace Jefferson, because all laws invoke a moral order, and any moral order relies upon religious tenets. Cult and culture derive from the same root word. What a culture prohibits and encourages reveals what that culture worships. Contrary to Jefferson's more eccentric rationalist musings, church and state have proven inseparable in all societies throughout history. Jefferson himself made this point explicit in the Declaration of Independence, which posits that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson may have demurred from choosing favorites among Congregationalists, Quakers, and Catholics, but he justified the American Revolution on a specific understanding of his Creator, without whom the country could not exist. When Jefferson fails to prove the secularists' case, they often turn to John Adams, who they claim once wrote that the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. In fact, Adams did not write that phrase, though he did affix his name to it. The American diplomat and Jeffersonian Republican Joel Barlow authored those words in the Treaty of Tripoli, which Adams signed in 1796. For centuries, Muslim pirates had preyed on Western sailors off the Barbary coast, stealing their cargoes and selling their survivors into slavery. According to William Eaton, the American consul general to Tunis, the Christians who would be on good terms with the Muslims must fight well or pay well. The fledgling United States did not look forward to either option, and the pirates' ultimatum may explain America's eagerness to deny the nation's Christian founding in the treaty. When they were not attempting to placate Muslim pirates, our founding fathers spoke more favorably of Christianity and its role in American public life. Whatever he signed on to in the Treaty of Tripoli, John Adams considered America to be a Christian nation. In an 1813 letter to Jefferson, Adams affirmed, "The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the only principles in which that beautiful assembly of young gentlemen could unite. And what were these general principles? I answer, the general principles of Christianity, in which all these sects were united." He believed the general principles of Christianity to be as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God, and considered the principles of liberty that England's Christian heritage had fostered to be as unalterable as human nature and our terrestrial mundane system. Adams did not forward his correspondence with Jefferson to the Barbary pirates. John Jay, another founding father and the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, put the nation's Christian founding in even starker terms. "Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers," he wrote in 1816, "and it is the duty, as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation, to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." Had the ACLU existed at the founding, it no doubt would have taken the Chief Justice to court. In 1979, Bob Dylan observed, "It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody." There can be no perfectly liberated or neutral political ground. All regimes have some sort of religious vision. The ensuing 2 decades witnessed the replacement of America's native religion with the anti-religion of secularism, a gradual change to which even many conservatives acquiesced thanks to their shallow and mistaken understanding of law, liberty, and the nation's founding. After the Supreme Court establishment of secularism as the sine qua non of municipal Christmas displays in Lynch versus Donnelly, radicals pressed the principle of the ruling to its logical conclusion and attempted to rid the public square of all specifically Christmas-time cheer. At some point during the 1990s, the Capitol Hill Christmas tree in Washington, D.C. became a holiday tree. As with so many politically correct slates of semantics, no one can quite pinpoint when or how the name was changed. Washington Post reporter Petula Dvorak blamed Paul Pincus, a Capitol Hill landscaper whom she quotes as saying, "I'm Jewish, and this is a holiday tree." By Pincus's logic, as Dvorak relates it, a Hanukkah menorah would suddenly transform into a holiday candelabra the moment a Methodist walked by it. The Hindu festival of Holi would become the holiday paintball game should a Muslim happen to stumble upon it. But even if the presence of additional observers had the power to secularize religious and cultural symbols, the politically correct never seemed to target non-Western signs and traditions. Pincus himself denied that any change occurred during the 90s, insisting that as far back as the 1960s, people referred to Capitol Hill's conifer simply as the tree. Regardless of how the name was changed, no neologism could change its Christmas character. For what purpose was the tree brought to the Capitol? Which holiday did the holiday tree celebrate? Controversy did not accompany the change from Christmas tree to holiday tree in the 1990s, but debate did ensue upon House Speaker Dennis Hastert's decision to restore the tree's proper name in 2005. Hamal Javeri, writing for the DCist, typified the tone of the time. "Leave it to our capital city to make politics out of the holiday season," she complained. Apparently, political correctness now goes as far as Christmas trees, or should I say, holiday trees. Javeri's mocking tone may resonate with readers of all political stripes, but one cannot immediately tell which aspect of the controversy she finds ridiculous, and the ambiguity persists throughout the piece. Regardless of any of these naming controversies, haven't we gone over the deep end as far as the trees are concerned? She asks. Indeed we have. But the writer refuses to name which side of the debate pushed us over the edge. These names mean very little to me, she insists. I think the only difference between a holiday, Christmas, or national tree probably would be the size of the trunk, the types of needles, or the strands of lights, she suggests. Javeri declares that the real truth and deeper meaning of the season involve not the incarnation, but the vaguer wish of peace on earth, goodwill to men, before exhorting her readers to leave the bickering for the Christmas dinner table when the relatives visit. In other words, stop making such a big deal about Christmas, conservatives, and just call it a holiday tree. For decades, politically correct cultural revolutionaries have evaded the task of justifying their radical plans by asking concerned conservatives, who cares? The radicals care, or else they wouldn't spend so much time and energy attempting to overturn long-standing traditions. If the politically correct renamers really believe that these semantic distinctions between Christmas and holiday trees mean nothing, then why not keep the traditional and precise term? The politically correct wordsmiths are the aggressing party in the cultural war, and they have the gall to call the rest of us obstreperous because we refuse to acquiesce to their inversions of our culture. The radicals know full well the power of apparently minor semantic shifts to transform culture. That is why they tried to banish Christmas trees from public squares around the country. In 2005, when Dennis Hastert restored the Capitol's Christmas tree, the city of Boston moved in the opposite direction, renaming its own giant spruce a holiday tree. Thomas Menino, Boston's mayor at the time, actually opposed the change. But the activists protected their plan from Democratic backlash with a typically progressive strategy. They effected the change through bureaucratic tinkering, thereby insulating it from political debate. Boston's Department of Parks and Recreation, rather than the city's mayor, wrought the change, and there was nothing any elected official could do about it. Philip Powell, a member of Harvard's Christian Fellowship, expressed exasperation at the city's decision. The holiday tree really is ridiculous, he observed. This is the Christmas season, and December 25th is Christmas, not some general feel-good day of celebration. Powell must not have consulted Himal Javeri, the Supreme Court majority that decided Lynch versus Donnelly, or the politically correct activists who sought to rid the public square of Christmas trees. According to them, December 25th is indeed a general, feel-good day of celebration. As the court explained in Lynch, it is the holiday's secularism that makes it fit for the public square. That very same year, major corporations joined the radical politicians in attempting to erase Christmas from Christmas time. Companies including Walmart, Target, Sears, Lowe's, and Best Buy, among others, some of the largest retailers in the country, avoided the word Christmas in their seasonal marketing materials. Some of the corporate giants corrected course in response to boycott threats from the American Family Association, AFA, and the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights, but many companies persisted in their secularizing program. In 2008, the AFA criticized Home Depot for avoiding the term Christmas in favor of the generic word holiday, particularly as the company continued to mention Hanukkah, suggesting a double standard whereby only Christian holidays go unnamed. Although the left-wing fact-checking website Snopes ruled the AFA's claim false because Home Depot had not entirely eliminated references to Christmas on its website, the home improvement retailer admitted to downplaying the holiday and promised to restore Christmas to its former prominence. As conservatives fought back against the concerted political campaign to diminish the importance of Christmas to Christmas time, politically correct activists modified their tactics. Rather than erase Christmas altogether, they would instead mention Christmas as just one Christmas time holiday among many. The clothing retailer The Gap adopted this approach in 2009, when one of its advertisements declared, "Go Christmas, go Hanukkah, go Kwanzaa, go Solstice," and suggested customers celebrate whatever holiday you wanna. Americans were free to celebrate Christmas, but multiculturalism and inclusion demanded they not celebrate it exclusively. But is Christmas really just one holiday among many? According to Gallup polling, a full 93% of Americans reported celebrating Christmas in 2019, down slightly from the 96% who celebrated Christmas in 1994, but more or less consistent with historical levels. By comparison, just 1.8% of Americans describe their religion as Jewish, and an additional 0.4% consider themselves irreligious Jews, meaning that a whopping 97.8% of Americans have no religious or cultural connection to Hanukkah whatsoever. Moreover, Jews who do celebrate Hanukkah consider it a minor holiday compared to major feasts such as Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. A similar percentage of Americans celebrate Kwanzaa, an ideological holiday invented by Maulana Karenga, née Ronald Everett, in 1966. At the time, Karenga was serving as chairman of the Black Studies Department at California State University, Long Beach, and he created the holiday as a vehicle to promote black nationalism and socialism, both of which he enshrined among Kwanzaa's 7 principles, along with other then-fashionable ideological ends. 5 years later, Karenga was forced to celebrate Kwanzaa inside a prison cell after his criminal conviction for imprisoning and torturing 2 women. Deborah Jones, one of Karenga's victims, describes being whipped with an electrical cord and beaten with a karate baton after being ordered to remove her clothes. Gail Davis, another victim, endured a hot soldering iron in her mouth and on her face before Karenga placed detergent and running hoses in the women's mouths and hit them on the head with a toaster. Perhaps the unsavory association helps to explain why Kwanzaa never took off. Likewise, though cultural excesses might suggest otherwise, less than 0.3% of Americans identify as pagan, raising doubts as to whether the gap really needed to include solstice among seasonal holidays on par with Christmas. But without the unobserved pagan feast, the minor Jewish holiday, and the socialist contrivance, all that remains to celebrate in December is Christmas, which the politically correct cannot permit. So by the 20-teens, the cultural revolutionaries had returned to unnamed holidays as their substitute term. The controversy persists to this day. In 2019, Wisconsin's newly elected Democrat Governor Tony Evers restyled his state's capital Christmas tree a holiday tree. Republicans in the state assembly quickly passed a resolution to reinstate the tree's proper title, after which lawmakers from both parties spent half an hour arguing over what to call the evergreen. Democrat State Representative Jonathan Brostoff accused his Republican colleagues of trying to politicize a tree, even though it was his own party's politicization of the tree that had kicked off the debate. Republican Representative Scott Krug observed his Democrat colleagues' obsession with semantic befuddlement. "Call the thing what it is," he demanded. "It's a Christmas tree. It's a Christmas tree. It's a Christmas tree." It is indeed a Christmas tree, but it holds more than tinsel and ornaments. A Christmas tree in a state building or public square stands for Christianity's special role in a society. A Christmas tree reminds people that different religions are different and make different claims about nature and politics. A Christmas tree resists the religion of scientific liberalism with which politically correct radicals hope to replace our culture's traditional faith. Governor Evers made this agenda explicit in a letter to students and educators in which he expressed his excitement to announce the 2019 Capitol Holiday Tree theme is Celebrate Science. Just as Christmas trees celebrate Christ, politically correct holiday trees celebrate secularism, which often masquerades under the moniker of science. Science properly understood means knowledge. The word derives from the Latin verb scire, to know. In the modern era, the term has taken on the specific meaning of knowledge about the physical world ascertained through methodical material inquiry. But Evers, who believes that men can become women and denies that babies are human, does not mean science in either of these senses. When Evers and his fellow secularists invoke science, they are referring to the fatalist faith popular among leftists for more than a century. According to this faith, the science of history will unfold along a progressive path whether we place ourselves on the right side of it or not. Conservatives sometimes refer to this perversion of science as scientism, but it is better understood as a secular religion, a sort of anti-religious religion, much as political correctness is an anti-standard standard. Political correctness works to destroy traditional standards of speech and behavior, and it succeeds both when it coerces some people to adopt the new code and when it convinces others to disavow standards entirely. Either response overthrows the old order. Scientism works in a similar way to discredit traditional religious and ethical considerations as legitimate in public discourse. Whether or not people accept all of the secularists' barmy notions about sex and life matters a little. If scientism simply convinces people to reject religion per se, it will have achieved the radicals' ends. For decades, conservatives have indulged the radicals' premises on both fronts, eschewing traditional standards as illiberal and traditional modes of moral discourse as unscientific. Is it any wonder that conservatives who aspire to behave like scientistic liberals should fail to conserve their culture from the revolutionary plans of politically correct radicals? These caponized conservatives accept the premises of their opponents, and, unlike our founding fathers and every other great statesman in history before or since, steadfastly refuse to assert their professed views of the world for fear of being wrongly called fascists or fools. As recently as the early 2000s, the triumph of political correctness seemed superficial and even frivolous. Social relations coarsened, language decayed, and reason retreated from the public square. But these changes provoked bemusement more than panic among most casual observers. Yet the sometimes subtle perversions that political correctness wrought in standards, speech, and thought threatened, in the early 20-teens, to overturn our most basic self-understanding. Second-wave feminists first thrust political correctness into the public eye during the 1970s. Over the ensuing decades, their allegedly modest claims and demands metastasized throughout the body politic. Then, as the 20th century gave way to the 21st, what had at first appeared as a battle of the sexes devolved into a battle for the sexes, and radicals began to deny the most basic distinction in human nature.
And that was Chapter 12, The War on Christmas, from Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, by Michael Knowles. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Management of the Absurd, Paradoxes in Leadership by Richard Farson. And I'm going to skip Chapter 19 because Chapter 20 is much more interesting than Chapter 19. In Chapter 20, big changes are easier to make than small ones. If ever there were a godfather to the idea of management of the absurd, it would certainly be C. Northcote Parkinson, author of the famed Parkinson's Law. Work expands to fill the time available. He was also responsible for many other similarly witty but powerful insights into the absurdities of human organizations. It was Parkinson who formulated the observation that the time a committee takes to discuss an item on the agenda is inversely proportional to the amount of money involved. All who have sat through budget meetings will recognize that phenomenon. It may take hours to discuss $100 items while $1 million items fly by. Almost everybody knows something sensible to say about a small item on the budget, but few can offer wise comments about a multi-million-dollar item. The CEO of a medium-sized electronics company once told me that in one day he was able to completely change the shape of his organization, flatten the organization chart, and eliminate several layers of management. But it took days to persuade one person to move his desk 10 feet. We are all painfully aware of the excessive time taken up in minor issues. Henry Kissinger is credited with the remark that the reason university faculty discussions and disputes are so time-consuming and acrimonious is that the stakes are so low. The case against gradualism. In most of our efforts to bring about change, we are counseled to take a gradual approach. The metaphor usually applied in these cases that we must crawl before we can walk and walk before we can run seems to make good common sense. But it may be that in the area of human affairs, that is not always the best counsel. Physician Dean Ornish, in arguing for a strict diet regimen, says that, quote, it is easier to make big changes than small ones because the benefits are so much more dramatic and they occur so much more quickly, unquote. Certainly, as we look at the pursuit of civil rights in America, it's not at all clear that the gradualism has worked that well. The pace of change has certainly been gradual, but whether gradualism as a strategy has been effective is debatable. Martin Luther King called it the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. The bold act that most dramatically and quickly brought about racial integration in a major institution of our society was President Harry Truman's elimination of Jim Crow laws in the armed services, which he accomplished by executive order. Segregation in the military yielded not by gradualism, but by massive immediate change, albeit resented and resisted. Conversely, the gradual approach to integration has encountered resentment and resistance while failing to bring about necessary change. While it is clear that African Americans have made significant gains since slavery, it is also true that, except in special cases, the differences between them and whites on economic and social basis have not diminished for decades. The disparity between incomes is still substantial. Our communities, by and large, are not integrated, and racism remains a strong force. I remember being told at the beginning of the modern civil rights movement that it might take an entire generation before the movement's overall objectives could be achieved. This was 2 entire generations ago, and still we see little change in the way in which African Americans and whites live together. The big change made by Truman held, the little ones have been much easier to resist. The author fails to mention here is the efforts of socialists to screw with integration. That was the watchword back in the day, was integration. We all live together, and the socialists didn't like that idea because it doesn't have any social friction to it. So instead, they demanded diversity, that all races keep to themselves and form their own communities, cliques, ghettos, and have their own leaders. And that's why we have such a lag in the amount or size of change in civil rights. Bold moves. General Motors stunned the business world in 1991 when the automaker announced that it would close 21 factories and lay off 74,000 employees. Painful as it was, the action perfectly illustrated the case to be made for big changes. The company's managers were convinced that downsizing had to be accomplished. They could do it one factory at a time, reaping adverse publicity and hostile employee reaction every tortuous step of the way, or they could put it behind them as quickly as possible and move on with the business of recovery. Their success at instant downsizing did not go unnoticed at other major corporations, which soon were doing the same. Chiat Day Advertising and the Otacon Corporation of Stockholm are among the companies that have made radical changes in the design of their operations. Both used advanced communication technologies to switch to paperless systems, restructure their management, do away with private offices, and become virtual companies. Such radical change would be impressive even if accomplished over a fairly long period of time. But in fact, both companies accomplished the changes all at once. If big changes are easier to make than small ones, that does not, of course, mean that making such changes is appropriate as a general strategy. Usually, not enough patient, careful analysis goes into management decisions, large or small. But the fact remains that people respect bold moves and are more likely to buy into a change if it is big enough to withstand any attempt at countering it. And that was Chapter 20. Big changes are easier to make than small ones. Next week, we're looking at Chapter 21. We learn not from our failures, but from our successes and the failures of others. And that was Management of the Absurd, Paradoxes in Leadership by Richard Farson. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.